first started working with Crow's Eye in about 2014, I think it was. I knew Nicole and Pauline because my wife is related to both of them. Nicole is my wife Lucy's cousin, and obviously Pauline is her auntie. And we were down there at their house for a visit, and they were talking about this film that they were making, a World War I drama called Tell 'Em of Us. And I kind of tentatively said, do you have anyone doing any music for it? Because it was an area that I wanted to try and get into and fancied that I would be pretty good at. So they said, yeah, I mean, do you want to try something? And Nicole sent up a couple of scenes from the film, and I tried a few things out, just tried to gauge the emotional tone of each scene and see if it could be enhanced or even subtly changed to make it more dramatic, and sent these scenes back with the music on it, and Nicole absolutely loved it, which was fantastic. And it flowed from there. Initially, it was maybe going to be one or two pieces of music for a couple of important scenes, and then as I got my teeth into it and really started enjoying the process, it ended up being music almost wall to wall for the whole film, with all the helping with the transitions and all that kind of stuff.
Robert is fine. Sure of it.
It was, I mean, I absolutely loved doing it, and I think it definitely helped like move the film into a new kind of realm, and hopefully I think Nicole agreed. So out of that, we then went on to work on some other things. They started doing the Getting Dressed series that Pauline was obviously heavily involved with her wonderful costume work. And I can't remember the first one we did. I think it was perhaps just a piece that had been on Tell 'Em of Us that Nicole wanted me to extend a little bit so they could use it on one of the films.
There were 2 large practical pockets. The apron was the item that the nurses were required to have the most of, 16 of them in all, which was an indicator both of the messy nature of their work and the levels of hygiene required.
So I extended it. It was maybe like a minute-long piece, and we extended it to 6 minutes or whatever the length of the film was. And obviously in that context for the Getting Dressed stuff, it's way more background music, leaving a lot of room for the voiceover that tells the narrative of the Getting Dressed series. But now and again there'll be a little pause in the narrative and the music can swell up and again just help drive the film along and make the whole thing a little bit more interesting.
By 1918, there were about 80,000 VAD members. Although there were many professional nursing groups working brilliantly and tirelessly during the war, it was the VAD nurses that remained in the popular imagination. It was the VAD nurse who washed and fed the patients, changed their dressings, and cared for their well-being. It was the VAD nurse who entertained the patients and jollied them along. It was the VAD nurse who held their hands through long nights of distress and encouraged them through difficult convalescence. It was not for nothing that they were known as the Tommy's favorite.
So there was quite a few of the Getting Dressed ones I was involved with. The ones that kind of stick in the memory were 2 that were for paintings where the big reveal is that someone's getting dressed, and then appearing in the famous painting at the end. So there was the girl with the pearl earring.
And they celebrated their lives in art. In 1665, a portrait of a young woman with a silk turban and large pearl earrings was painted by Delft artist Johannes Vermeer. Her identity remains a mystery, and today she is known simply as the girl with a pearl earring.
And obviously a kind of big emotional swell at the end where it's revealed that that's what she's getting dressed for. And I think there was Mona Lisa as well that I was involved with.
He took many years to complete the portrait and then kept it with him for the rest of his life. Over the centuries, the pigments and glazes have darkened, and cleaning in an earlier century has thinned the silk veil over her forehead and removed her eyebrows and eyelashes. But nothing has dimmed that smile. Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of Mona Lisa is now regarded as the finest example of Renaissance portraiture and is the most famous painting in the world.
A similar kind of thing where it's this big reveal at the end with a nice swell in the music. And then there was a few ones more to do with, there was a couple of Christmas ones, I think, so obviously much more festive music. And then a Halloween one where there was a Mary Shelley getting dressed theme, and obviously played around with the music a bit more with that one, making it a bit more dramatic and taking some inspiration from the Mary Shelley and the kind of horror themes. So having it sounding a bit more ominous at points, and that was quite fun too.
What terrified me will terrify others, and I need only describe the spectre which had haunted me my midnight pillow. On the morrow I announced that I had thought of a story. I began that day with the words, "It was on a dreary night of November," making only a transcript of the grim terrors of my waking dream. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils, with an anxiety that almost amounted to agony. I collected the instruments of life around me that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet.
So the process was obviously slightly different between working on the film Tell Them of Us and the getting dressed stuff. But so for example, for Tell Them of Us, as I mentioned, I would get sent the separate scenes and then maybe watch them a few times, just get a feel for the tone of it and how much space there was for music as opposed to where the dialogue's the most important thing. And then I would just start tinkering about either on the keyboard, quite often just starting with a piano, something simple, or maybe the cello is quite a prominent instrument as well in Tell Them of Us, because it's quite a mournful sounding instrument, and obviously there's many aspects of the story that are quite mournful. and then I would just have a play about, try a few things out, and quite often I find it's just that first thing that you play, you're like, I don't think I'm going to get any better than that. It's just that immediate response to what you're watching, and what that provokes in me, and then I'll start playing, and Bob's your uncle. Now and again you don't hit it first time, and you have to have a few tries, but and also in the Tell Them of Us stuff, I would bring out my classical guitar now and again. That's what I did as my sort of further education. I studied classical guitar, and it doesn't come out of its case all that often these days. But I did bring it out to work on some of the music for that, and I think at least one of the Getting Dressed ones as well. And as I said, the process for getting dressed was slightly different, because often Nicole would send me perhaps a reference piece that would already be on the film, which would relate to the period that the costume came from, and I would do something similar, but obviously just trying to enhance the tone. And again, it had to have that ebb and flow that stayed out the way of the voiceover, and if there's any swells, it's just in the appropriate places where it's not getting in the way of the voice. So two quite different ways of working. Not long after the Tell Them of Us film had come out, it had been my intention to put that music out as a soundtrack album, and Nicole was going to be happy to help promote that as well. And now here we are, it's late 2025, and I'm finally getting around to it. But there was so much other music in the interim of a semi-classical nature between the other work with Crow's Eye and also another couple of short films that I was involved with, and various other little bits and bobs. As I was digging through all this music, I realised there was almost 2 hours worth of different pieces of music, and I thought it would make more sense to release this as 2 separate albums, and I called it Hammered, Plucked and Bowed Part 1 and Hammered, Plucked and Bowed Part 2, and I'm releasing it not under my normal name, Chris Gordon, but under my initials, CJ Gordon, for reasons to do with professional identity stuff, in that at some point I'll probably release some solo music as Chris Gordon, in amongst the many other band name projects that I've done through the years. So it seemed to make sense to make this a separate entity as CJ Gordon, that would encompass all these semi-classical style works. And the way I'm releasing it is on Bandcamp, where you'll be able to download both albums in high quality audio files for a small remuneration. And I decided to do it this way rather than Spotify, iTunes, because they're not the best in terms of rewarding artists for their hard-earned work. You get like just micro pennies per 1,000 streams. So this seemed like a fair way of making the music available for people that were interested in it, and giving them a chance to get a copy of it.